Welcome everybody. I'm Sarah Dodsworth. I'm the Regional Director for Northern Yorkshire and Humber, and I'm really pleased to be hosting this event for our internationally educated nursing staff. It's part of a series of events that are being hosted by different regions around England, and there is a programme of meetings throughout the year. There's at least one a month, and it covers a wide range of topics. And tonight, Yorkshire and Humber are hosting the On Arrival and Settling in the UK. It gives me a great pleasure to introduce Bella, who is not only a Yorkshire and Humber board member, but she's also a clinical educator and a nurse from overseas herself, and she's going to share some of her story. And then we've got Claire Cannings, who is our senior welfare advisor, who's going to cover a range of topics about living, working and settling in the UK. So I shall go on mute now and off camera and invite Bella and Claire to do their bit. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Yes, so my name is Bella. As you can see, my name is Bella Abidakun. I'm an internationally educated nurse. I've been in the UK for almost 5 years now. Yeah, so quite some time. And yeah, coming into the UK as a nurse, I mean, it's like a different dynamics, different things. And so coming from a different country and trying to settle in the UK, there were two different dynamics that I needed to try to understand. The first part was I was going to be leaving my family and coming to somewhere I knew no one, even if I had family somewhere else. It was quite different, but I thought, yeah, I'm up for it. So here I am, arriving in the UK and settling in. There is so much to say, but we've got a little time. So I'll just be sharing my experience with you all on how I was able to cope. And I'm happy to take questions where I'm as much as possible I can give the answers. And I know Claire has got some points that I also need to know about. So Claire, I'll be coming down with some questions for you as well, because I'm still an internationally educated nurse anyway. So, right. Education for children. So, back home for us, it's more about knowing the age, what your child can do per time. It's not about the age. So if your child is all right and they feel their level is really high, they can go a step further. That's what we experience back home and in some other countries where the most international nurses is coming from. And so arriving in the UK, we're like, oh, you have to put in the child's age and date of birth, and that would determine the class. Well, so that was quite new and shocking. So for me, my daughter had to step down a class because she was already ahead. But using the UK system, it just puts you in a particular place. And so there are loads of things we need to learn and know about child education. The easiest way to go about it, thank you, RCN, for bringing this up. However, we can still go to our local council because that's where we get the information. You go there, click on the education. Depending on where you are located, they'll tell you the process. That was what I did for my kids. I've got 4 beautiful kids across different range. And that was where I was able to, get into the system, and I started my journey. So getting to know your local council, the website, I mean, the internet, everywhere there's Wi-Fi, we can do that. Age is the factor. I needed to put that there because there were so many shockers when we got here. And same thing for other friends and colleagues. So it's not about, oh, my child was in year 4 back from where we're coming from, so she has to be in year 4. No, you have to go with the system. Adult education is quite available depending on what you want to do, be it a certification, a top-up degree, post-degree, depending on what you want to do. Some trusts will sponsor, most trusts I know do sponsor, and also you can self-sponsor depending on what you want to do. However, I also know RCN does, they've got their own certification programs, they've got some trainings for us. So depending on how you want to educate yourself, where you want to be, there are loads of opportunities if we're ready to make them. So the best thing to do is make your inquiries. There's always someone to help you. I'll just like to say this here, that if we've got questions. Just pop in your question. I think I'll be able to take them at the end. So just, yeah, pop in your question. Someone is taking note of them. The weather. Oh my goodness. The UK weather is, I remember before I came in, I was sending mails to say, what weather is this going to be when we arrive in, just so I could be, well prepared. And they were like, oh no, Bella, you'll be coming in summer. And that was about June, end of June. And I'm like, okay, so I, prepared summer in my head. I remember coming out of the train and I'm like, what is this? What is this? Because it was really cold. So that's the first shocker for most of us, especially for people who are coming in October, November. And then if you're coming from the tropics, coming straight into, if you then think you're coming to the northern area, it can be pretty cold. So that's your first shocker. However, you can get ready for the 4 seasons, all right? The weather app is a must. It's on my first page before you step out. I used to see people do it and I was wondering, what's the point? Why are these people so obsessed? And I stayed only for a bit and discovered I've joined the group. So we need to know what the weather is like before we step out. What are we taking? How are we dressing? And I've heard sometimes you can get 4 seasons in one day. Yeah, if you're where I am, sometimes that does happen. So this is one of the things that does happen. The British weather is it's a conversation for another day. It's something people always talk about. So you want to also monitor your skin. I have to say this, especially for those coming from the tropics. I think the weather sometimes just affects our skin. So you come in, monitor the changes, if it's your hair or your skin, and then you begin to adapt. So some people would need to have moisturizers all the time. Some will just need to do their normal lotion. But depending on what type of skin you've got and the changes that begin to happen, that will determine what you will do. Right? So also understanding your local area and its peculiarities. I remember a friend of mine who came from Birmingham to see me some time ago. And then she said, oh, Bella, it's so cold. And this was in July. And I'm like, it's not really cold. She was like, no, where I am, it's not this cold. But, so what I'm trying to say here is depending on where you are located in the UK, you can have different weather, different season. It's snowing somewhere else. And in the other places, it's not snowing, but it could be very cold. However, with your weather app, you're able to prepare for all them 4 seasons. Childcare. Childcare does ring a bell. It must ring a bell. Again, age is a factor. So for me, when we came in, my last child was 3. And back home, before we came here, he was already in school, because there are always schools who are willing to take them, like nurseries, and then you drop them like you're dropping your kids for school and pick them up. But the dynamics in the UK is pretty different. If you have to put them in school before the age of 3, it means that's nursery. It might have to do with private. There's so many things, attached to it, laws which we must check. Your child has to be 3, and then depending on what we're covered for as international nurses, some say we're only covered for 30 hours, some say 15 hours, but I think it's 15 hours. I don't know if Claire will be able to help us out with that. 15 hours when the child is still 3, just attending nursery. And I think we did 2 days a week. And I had to, shift with my husband. We were working on opposite patterns just to be sure we were able to carry out we're able to be there for our son and our other kids that were younger, right? So age is a factor. The parents are the primary source of care here. For us, back home, you have loads of family involvement. You have your mom, you have your sisters, your brothers. We're more like a community. If this person isn't coming to stay, the other person is coming. So it was quite easy, to, carry out, have childcare, go to work and resume. But in the UK, it's quite different. Everyone has got to, be at work. People are busy. So it's intentional planning. having a child less than 3, or even, even if it's 4 or 5, we have to plan. Both parents must plan how they would care for their child, because again, you want to look at, for a nurse who you might have a permanent shift, you have to resume at 7, and maybe on a long day you close at 8. Those are the challenges you want to look at, think about it, ensure you are well planned with this. Another source for childcare is childminders. I know there are loads of childminders. If you look at your local newspapers, you get information. For me, I'm in my own local newspaper where you can see these trainings. And so some people take advantage of childminders. They also take advantage of babysitters. Mind you, these things, you need to check your pocket first and then know what you have to do with childcare. It's a big area here. We need to really plan and focus, be very intentional. Registering GP and dentist. I remember just 2 days ago, so just speaking with one of the people I work with, and they've just come into the country, and she's having this reaction, but she's not registered with a GP, And so sometimes for most of us, when we come in as international nurses, we're thinking, oh, there's nothing to do. I have to hold on and wait. Good news, we can call 111. And that was exactly what I did for this lady who was just coming and needed help. So she was asked to call 111, and she was able to, connect and get the right treatment or prescription. However, people can register with the GP using the nhs.uk/the service site. If you go on there, you're able to, it's an easy process. However, I think you can also walk in, depending on your locality where you are. You can just search up GP nearest to you. They would come up, and then you can say this is where you want to register with. However, registering with the dentist, I wish I could say it's the same thing, but it's slightly different. Registering with dentists, because most people want to register using the NHS because, the services are pocket friendly, if I may say so. However, there is a long waiting list. I remember being told, oh, yeah, you want to sign up with the NHS, you might have to wait, and the waiting list is for about 8 months or things like that. So you can register with the GP if you're available to hold on. However, another strategy, if you can get onto the private dentist, and then if you're still on the waiting list, once it gets to your time, 8 months, 6 months, whenever, then you can get into register with the NHS dentist. So I don't know if there's a way we can share the link so people who may be interested, or you can copy it down or something. It could be shared with us if possible. These are the links. So it's possible you can get registered. So to access a GP and dentist, if you have the 111 service, if you can use that, you can also get some information that you will need. So for all international nurses, and good news is, you're not paying, we're not paying. It comes, as part of what we have. But however, somehow, maybe tax and things, but it's not something that you're going and saying, oh, I don't have the money to access care. There is care available for each and every one of us. Discovering your local area, we come from different backgrounds with different belief system, different faith. However, I can say that for every faith, for every practice, for every religion, there is a community, there is a group you can choose to belong to. Looking at your local community, wherever you're situated, you can find a community. For me, all I did was just walk into the place. I saw what looks like what I was interested in, and my family, we started attending. Not just your faith groups, support groups. Some mothers with toddlers want to meet, other toddlers or preschool age children, the different support groups, or maybe people who are struggling in a particular area or common areas. There are groups all over the place. What we can do is search them up ensure that they're reliable. How you can do that, I can't really say right now, but there are different places you can access support, either for your faith or for support groups. So I just wrote here that in hospitals, they've got chaplain and the chapel where people can also access. And the chapel in the hospital, what I found amazing is it's not just for Christians. You get Muslims who go there to pray. Depending on what you practice, there is a space for everyone. But all you need to do is make sure you ask the right questions and ask the right people. Right? So whatever support group you need, be it faith, it is available. Right. Staying in the UK with family and friends outside, staying in contact with family and friends outside the UK. You don't want to know my experience. I remember because when I left, I was in the UK for about 5 months and a half. Was it difficult? Yes, it was. It was difficult. But yeah, the internet, the WhatsApp and all of that has really made life really interesting for us. And we can keep in touch daily, weekly, it's just about keeping in touch, making sure we have that connection. However, sometimes there is this, you want that physical presence, but you have the good support systems, depending on where you work, the support systems who could provide what you need, like maybe give you great access. You go to your manager, speak to your manager. If you have to travel, if you have to take your leave, depending on what it is, hopefully it's not a sickness or a chronic or problem, you would be given that opportunity to speak to your loved ones. However, loved ones also come in. If I remember, my mom didn't have to come and live with me like my dependent, but she did visit, and that's quite possible. So there is no barrier with coming to the UK and saying, oh, I'm not going to see my family, I'm not going to see my loved ones. We can get in touch, we can keep in touch. You can invite. I think the shortest invitation period is for 6 months. And for those who maybe your family or your loved ones are not here, pending, maybe you're waiting for your OSCE results, you can do the calling, video call, daily, weekly audio calls. I mean, Zoom call. People now do, family meetings. However, it's just for us to be intentional. We have to be intentional to stay connected and, make plans to call, because sometimes life gets really busy, gets in the way, and you just forget and think you're all alone. No, please, there are also people around you who you would also love to connect with. So please explore reasons, no excuses, please. Let's find ways to enjoy what we've come to do and make the best use and get the best worth from what we have decided to do. So this is more about my story on arriving and settling in the UK. I hope that there's great support for you. So at this junction, I would say this is the end of my slide. I would hand you over straight up to Claire. Take it away, Claire.
Thank you, Bella. So lovely to hear such warm advice based on your personal experiences. I really like the point you made about us being kind of social beings and needing to make connections. And also like the bit that you said about our obsession with the weather, because I'm on the south coast at the moment and there's a huge thunderstorm here at the moment. So that made me smile. Like Bella, I'm very, very happy to take questions at the end. If you want to drop them in the chat, then we can pick those up a little bit later on. So I've worked in the RCN for quite a few years now, and I've always had a huge amount of pleasure from working with our internationally educated members. But unfortunately, in member support services, we tend to hear from our members when things have hit rock bottom. So what I'd like to do now is to make you aware of the support and advice that's available to you from the RCN, and hopefully this will ensure that you can seek the support that you need as soon as possible rather than leaving things too late. So firstly, I'll quickly run through the support services available from my wider department, and then I'll run through the more common presenting issues that we deal with for the international nurses that we deal with day to day. So any of you who may already have had to instruct an immigration solicitor will be aware that the cost of legal advice and support can run into the hundreds and unfortunately sometimes thousands of pounds. But as an RCN member, you can get all this advice and support for free. So you would only need to pay for the cost of an application to the Home Office for a variation of your leave to remain. So this is a massive benefit for those who might need legal support for dealing with the Home Office. You'll see from this list here that this type of support is really comprehensive. So it varies from extending a visa to applying for settled status and citizenship in the UK. So it's one of the many advantages of being a member of the RCN. So as Bala has already outlined, you'll come across all kinds of emotional issues when you come to live and work in the UK. Some of them you'll be expecting and others will be a little bit unexpected. So it could unfortunately be a bereavement, it could be a family issue, or dealing with a difficult relationship at work that might be upsetting for you. Even if you have a really comprehensive support network of friends and family, it can sometimes be beneficial to discuss these issues with a qualified counsellor. They can be objective and talk with you about how you're feeling and discuss ways of dealing with the emotions that particular situation may have brought up for you. And the counselling service offers up to 6 one-to-one sessions, and these are provided over the phone. And the contact details for getting in touch with the counselling service are on this slide, and these will be available to you after the session. So some of you may have come to the UK and be working in an area which is not where your expertise is in your home country. So you might be really keen to move to a job where your previous qualifications and experience are better utilised in the UK. So there's a really comprehensive research available on the RCN website, which you can see here, which can help members with things like interview skills, advice on putting together a CV, as well as a UK-wide job vacancy list. And all of these can be really beneficial in helping you plan for your next job. Another service available for member support service is careers coaching. So this is quite different from careers advice. It's not about locating a job. It's more detailed conversation to help you explore your next career steps. This can be especially helpful when you feel unsure of your direction. It might be that there are other opportunities available for you in the UK that you're not aware of. Or it might be when you feel like you're at a bit of a career crossroads. So what they will help you do is identify your values, strengths, priorities or goals, talk you through your ideas, aspirations and maybe your fears even, and encourage you to think of ways to move forward. They'll also explore reasons behind any decisions you're making, and they might go through with you some of the hesitations that you're having. Again, these are free and they're one-to-one phone calls with a qualified careers coach, and they can be booked by calling RCN Direct. So the welfare service is the service that I head up, and we provide a wide variety of advice and support. This is mostly relating to financial difficulties, unmanageable debt and problems with housing. I think I can sum it up nicely with a case that I was dealing last week, because one of the areas we get most referrals from is international members who might owe money to their employer. And this is usually from fees associated with coming to the UK. So one of our members, Zeke, felt that he wasn't getting the development he deserved at the nursing home he was working in. So his previous experience in India was in cardiology. So after 8 months of feeling pretty underutilised in the nursing home he was working in, he decided he'd like to apply for a staff nurse role in the cardiology unit at his local hospital. But when he approached his employer, they advised him that if he left within the next 2 years, he would still owe them nearly £3,000. And this was the cost of his visa and flight to the UK. So this potential debt was putting Zeke off moving on to his new job, and he was finding the whole situation really frustrating. So he contacted his RCN rep, and who advised him to speak to us in the welfare service. And what we were able to do for him was assist him in negotiating a repayment plan with the employer. So what they agreed was that he'd repay the debt in 12 instalments, and this was after he'd left the nursing home. And this meant that he could afford to move on to his new job within the NHS. So it's worth noting that most employers will try and take a debt from your final salary. So it's important to get the debt checked to ensure that the money they are asking for is firstly legitimate, because sometimes there are fees that they will add in that aren't legitimate, and also try and negotiate a repayment plan if possible before you leave. So another issue that can be a bit of a shock when you get your first payslip in the UK is that you realise that the contributions for tax and national insurance are taken out at source. And these are taken out before your salary is paid to you. So if you haven't already started a job, it's worth working out what your take-home pay would be. So this is a more realistic indication of your income and can help you to budget more easily. So you'll get your top line salary, and that's the amount that the employer will say that you're paid. But when you take off tax and national insurance, the amount that you take home every month, and Bella's nodding there, is significantly less than what you might have anticipated. So there are online calculators that you can use. You can put in your top line salary, what the employer says that you're going to be receiving, and it will work out what your tax and national insurance are going to be, and that will give you a better indication. So I thought it might be helpful to look at a pay slip and identify some of the issues that might come up around pay. I think is sort of forewarned is forearmed. So these are the sort of things to look out for. So your tax code will be made up of numbers and letters, and you'll be given this code, and this indicates the amount that you can earn before you pay tax. So for example, the most common tax code is a 1257L. And what this means is that you can earn £12,570 before you start paying tax. And that's the most common tax code. After you've earned that £12,570, then tax will normally be paid at 20% for the earnings above this rate until you reach the kind of higher tax threshold. And then if you have a tax code, and hopefully this won't be the case, but it might be if you move to a new job or you don't have a national insurance number and a tax code when you start your first job in the UK. But if you have a tax code that has a W1, an M1 or an X at the end, this will mean that you're on an emergency tax code. Now, this can be a real shock because it means that you'll be paying tax at 40%. And it tends to only happen when the employer is waiting for your new tax code from the government. But you will get this money back, and you will get it back hopefully very quickly within the first couple of weeks. But if it's taking a lot longer, then you'll need to get in touch with your local tax office, and your employer can provide that number. Another issue is a second job. Now, some people will take on a second job on top of their substantive post to increase their income. If you decide to do a part-time job for another employer, please do ensure that you let them know that you have another job and give them your tax code. Unfortunately, we see far too many cases where members end up owing a considerable amount of money at the end of the tax year, and this can be avoided by speaking to your payroll before you start your second job. So one of the things that I wanted to raise was, whilst we completely understand the importance of sending money home to support your family, it's also really important that you firstly take into consideration your personal costs and expenses whilst living and working in the UK. We see members every month who are in quite severe financial difficulty with unpaid debts, and this is especially around rent and council tax. And this is often because they're sending more money home than they can realistically afford. One suggestion is that as soon as possible, you write a list outlining your essential outgoings. So that'll be things like rent and your council tax, your gas, electricity, and your travel costs. And this will help you budget better. And then you can work out how much you've got left over that you can send home to support your family rather than the other way around. One thing that, slightly more positive thing to mention, that is if you do get into financial difficulties, there are some charities and trust funds that are set up to provide grants specifically for nurses. And they've all got different criteria for making awards. So some will depend on how long you've been in nursing. Others have kind of geographical areas which they will help nurses in that particular area. There's plenty of information on the financial wellbeing on the RCN website. So there's a massive resource available on the website about finances and some of the things that we've covered this evening. These charities are brilliant, but they tend to only provide a short-term solution. So it might be a one-off grant, a payment to help with rent arrears, for example. So if you're struggling financially, you might also want to look at other longer-term solutions. So the accommodation provided by your employer when you arrive in the UK might only be temporary, or it might prove to be unsuitable for you in the longer term. It might be that you're asked to share a room, or that you're sharing with people that it's only working out in the short term. And we do find that when employees leave accommodation provided by their employer, they can sometimes struggle with the cost of rent in the private sector. It can sometimes come as a bit of a shock. So it's worth noting that most private rented accommodation requires at least 4 weeks rent in advance, as well as a 4-week deposit up front, and sometimes that can go up to as much as 6 weeks. It's also worth noting that council housing is a public fund. So whilst council housing can be a little bit cheaper than the private sector, you unfortunately can't apply for that if you have a public fund restriction still in your passport. Obviously, when that's taken out, if you have indefinite leave to remain or your circumstances change, then you can apply at that point. But it's really important that you don't apply for council housing because you'll be outside of the term of your visa. One thing to consider when trying to reduce the cost of living is deciding where you're going to live in the UK. There's a huge regional cost of living variation for the UK, and it's especially true for rent. It might be that moving to an employer in a different part of the country could greatly reduce your outgoings. So this is an example of a member that we helped last year. When Rosa contacted us, she was really worried that she'd made the wrong decision to come and work in the UK. So she came to London from Nigeria in 2021, and she was given accommodation initially in the nursing home she was working in. This was completely suitable for her, and she thought it was going to be longer term. She paid for this out of her wages, and she was able to afford to pay the rent and send money back to her family. But after 12 months, she was asked to leave the accommodation to make space for new employees arriving in the UK. And when she looked into it, a 1-bedroom flat in the area of North London where her job was would cost her £1,400. And then on top of this, she had council tax and utility bills. So the cost of living for her would have meant not being able to send money back to her family. And as she explained, that was one of the main reasons that she'd come to the UK in the shorter term. So we looked into this a little bit for her, and as it happened, she got a friend who'd recently got a new job in a place called Oadby in Leicester. And when we looked into it, a 1-bedroom flat there, the average was about £712, and the council tax was considerably lower. So do your research. There's a website at the end of the presentation that lists the rents in different parts of the country. So if you're wanting to reduce your cost of living, it's worth looking to see what the options that might be available to you. Childcare provision. Bella brought this up earlier, and she did a really good overview of the sort of cultural differences for childcare. It is, unfortunately, the formal childcare that's available in the UK is very expensive. There is, it's one of the biggest costs of living outside of rent. Now, as Bella said, she wasn't too sure, but all 3 and 4-year-olds are entitled to 15 hours free childcare, and that's regardless of your public fund status. So that's available to you if you have a child who's aged 3 or 4. Now, there is some confusion because there's a huge amount of schemes available for childcare costs, but it's worth noting that some of them are public funds. So the 30-hour scheme for those on lower incomes is a public fund. Assistance with childcare via Universal Credit is a public fund. So be really careful when you're looking into schemes to see what, as Bella said, your purse is, and to make sure that you're not applying for anything that is a public fund and therefore outside of your visa requirements. The 15 hours free childcare, the childcare must be approved. So you can't just ask your friend to look after your child and then pay them. If they're not an approved childminder, you won't get the free 15 hours. So it needs to be a registered nursery, a registered childminder, a school play scheme, a nanny, or a registered club. And again, it can be a registered school. There is information available on the government website about help with childcare costs. Be really clear that you go to this government site, because some of the other sites, whilst they list all the childcare, they don't go into the kind of nitty-gritty about the public fund restrictions. So you might find that you're looking at schemes that aren't applicable to you. So hopefully that answers the question about childcare, Bella. And like Bella said, once you've navigated some of the settling in issues, hopefully everything will fall into place for you, as it has done with Bella. So thank you very much for listening, and please feel free to ask any questions that you have at the end.
Thank you very much, Bella and Claire. That was really exciting and interesting, and hopefully there's some useful resources there for everybody on the call. The next part of this is just a presentation about the benefits of joining the RCN, and I'm going to just spend a couple of minutes telling you why you should join if what Bella and Claire have said wasn't enough to incentivise you already if you're not already a member. So professional development, and I see a question about how we can support our internationally educated nurses with funding for further development, and the RCN is able to help often. We have a charity called the RCN Foundation, and that has a range of grants and monies available to help you with funding continuing professional development. Employers are also a good source of that, in all honesty, but I'm here to talk about what you can get via the RCN. There are loads of free resources online as well for that, and we've got the largest library, we like to say in the world, but we definitely know it's in Europe, for nursing, and so that's a brilliant resource, and it's got all sorts of brilliant things there, and it's all available online. If you're studying and you are post-reg, they will undertake literature searches for you, which I think is worth the money anyway, because when I did it, we used to have to go to the library and photocopy everything, and now you can do it all online. So that's a reason to join. The workplace support, most people join the RCN because they see it as an insurance policy in case things go wrong at work. And if you were to have problems at work, there may be a local RCN rep. If you work in the private sector, that's not likely, but there is support via RCN Direct, our helpline, and you can also get help from the offices too. So we would support you if you were in trouble, if you were being disciplined, if you were being bullied. We can help you with all of those things in the workplace through the RCN, and you can access that support via the website first of all. The other thing we do, apart from the immigration service, is provide employment advice from a legal team, a lawyer. So if you were to have trouble at work and there was a legal claim, so long as it had a 51% prospect of success, our lawyers will be able to help and advise you to take that employment matter straight through to the courts. So that's a really good reason to be joining. The member support we've got is brilliant. We've already talked about the counselling service, but one of the things, it's not on this slide, and I don't know if it's on the next slide, but is the discount scheme that we run, which is a brilliant thing, and I've used it a lot. So I managed to get, I'm just using this as an example, through the scheme, parking at an airport with a valet for less than it was going to cost me to book through the company website through the RCN. And that's called RCN Extra. And you can click on the RCN website for that to find those discounts. You'll also find deals on cinema tickets and household purchases. And it's a really good place to look if you've got a big purchase. It would stop you shopping on a whim, because you've got to plan it and book it. And I like the word that Bella uses, intentional shopping, a great place via RCN Extra, not such a good place for whim shopping, but you can save a fortune using that. The other thing that we have is peer support. We have lots and lots of professional guides, and we also have an RCN Congress, which is a gathering of nursing staff annually where we go and debate and get all excited about nursing. And if you're feeling a bit jaded, that's the place to go to reignite your enthusiasm about nursing for the following year. That's managed by the local branches, and each area will have a branch linked to an employer. And if you want to get help, that's another place to go. But it's also a place to go should you want to get involved with the RCN. There's loads of opportunities in the RCN, and branches are a place to find out where that may be. I think Claire talked about the careers advice and loads of other services, and it's a bargain, quite frankly. Now, I would say that, wouldn't I? Because I am working for the RCN, but I joined as a student nurse in 1987 and have been a member ever since, and have used the services, particularly that discount scheme. I would say to anybody on this call who isn't a member of the RCN, please consider joining. It's well worth the money, and actually if you do get into trouble, you'll wish you had, because we wouldn't represent if you weren't in membership at the time the incident happened. So that's the first thing. But for the Q's and A's, I can see some questions in the chat, and I've got my panel of people. I didn't go on camera because my internet's a bit dodgy. If I can invite Peter and Emma to join. If you want to just quickly introduce yourselves, Peter and Emma.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Peter Clark. I'm the operational manager for Yorkshire and Humber regions and Northern. Good evening.
Hi, everybody. My name's Emma Phillips and I'm Regional Development Officer in Yorkshire and Humber.
Thank you. So we've got a question, and it's, is there any available scheme that could help nurses to pay for indefinite leave to remain, especially when we have families and it can cost almost £2,900 per person? I'm going to direct that question to Claire to see if she knows the answer.
That's fine. I'm happy to answer that, Sarah. The short answer there is, unfortunately, there isn't a specific scheme available to help with those costs. But what I would say, I talked a little bit earlier about sort of charities and trust funds. Now, charities would tend not to assist in this situation because it's not an unexpected cost. But there are trust funds, and there's a database of trust funds that might be able to assist. It would involve lots of letter writing, sending off sort of your background and details of what you need and why. But the link to the trust fund is on the financial wellbeing website from the RCN, so that's worth having a look into. I think I mentioned already that even though it doesn't pay for the costs of the application, the RCN legal service will provide advice which would reduce obviously the cost of you putting in the application. So you wouldn't need to pay for independent advice. That would come as part of membership. So the answer to that is that there may be some trust funds that would assist you, but you'd need to do the research on the database and write the letters to them asking for assistance.
And for the legal advice, you would, of course, need to be an RCN member. Yeah.
Yes.
And then the question that Peter's asked in the chat, is the scheme, do you need to be an RCN membership? For the discount scheme, yes, you do, because that is one of the benefits of membership. The other question above was the question around supporting funding for further development. I'm hoping I answered that when I talked about the foundation and approaching your employer, but other organisations also exist to find that funding. There are other charities and places where you can seek help, and an internet search, just searching in Google funding for courses, would easily find you things. But the first port of call should be the RCN website, because that's got a massive range of resources that will help you to find something that may be able to assist with fees, if not sometimes pay them. There's some new messages. Somebody's asking, how much is the annual membership? Now, I know that for registrants, once you have your PIN number, it's £16.40 a month. And I'm just struggling to work that out as an annual fee, which I did know when I started the call, and it's on the tip of my tongue. So if anybody can help from the panel, that would be great. Anyone know offhand the annual cost of memberships?
I've just got a link and a page on the website up. So for full registered nurses, within their first year of registration with the NMC, the full rate would be £98.43 for the year, or you can claim some tax relief on that, so it would bring it down to £78.74. For any registered nurses who have already been registered with the NMC for more than a year, then the full price is £196.85. With tax relief, it would be £157.48. And for nursing support workers, it's different. So what I'll do is I'll put the link in the chat, because then people can access that and they can see how it works for them and their individual circumstances.
And it's all available monthly by direct debit. We don't take payment for membership as some other unions do through your salary. Unison, for instance, would do that scheme, but we take it all by direct debit. How do you apply for tax relief? Do we have tax relief even if Tier 2 visa? I'm thinking Claire might know the answer to that.
Yeah, tax relief on your RCM membership and your NMC fees is available to you. It's not a public fund, so even if you're on a Tier 2 visa, you can claim that. You need to do it via the tax office, but there's a really helpful, and hopefully we can get a link up for that, really helpful, very short information sheet on the RCN website, which will tell you how to claim tax relief on your membership and your NMC fees, and for certain uniform and for washing your uniform as well. Oh, and probably a flag up here for the nursing standard. You can claim tax relief on that.
Thank you. I suspect Peter's looking for that link.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping.
She's doing
brilliant. Thank you.
And while she is, I'm just going to ask Emma to give her event a plug.
Thanks, Sarah. So Yorkshire and Humber and Northern Region are running a joint event on the 6th of December in York, and that's to relaunch our internationally educated nurses network. So from the new year, we hope to have that network up and running, and the event in December is to allow you to come and meet with us, do some work around developing that network and getting it set up, so that we are giving you what you want and you need, and are able to structure the sessions so that we are meeting your expectations and not giving you something that you actually maybe don't want or need. We have a lady called Evangeline coming to talk to us about her Filipino network, which she's set up and established in Hull. We also have on the agenda Alan Chalkley, who's going to do a session about how to make the most of the library that Sarah's mentioned already. And we have one of our RCN solicitors coming to talk to you about discrimination, how to recognise it and what to do about it, and how we can support as the RCN as well. So it's an interesting day. Lunch is included, and it's a lovely venue in York, right next to the railway station. So please have a look on the website and book yourself a place if you'd like to join us.
And there's a handy link in the chat. So any other questions? I'm also going to draw your attention to an evaluation link that Ben posted. He may do it again if I ask him nicely, so it's at the bottom. And once you've completed it, you'll get a certificate of attendance in the following days, as long as you add your name and your email. If you don't add your name and your email, it will not arrive. And
there is one more question in the chat, Sarah, from Hannah, and she just asked that are trusts obliged to redeploy nurses who have suffered injury soon after employment? I think sort of, Hannah, the answer to that is, as everything is never sort of quite straightforward. It would depend on the employer, the terms and conditions that were in there, but normally if an injury has occurred, then an employer would look to redeploy and look to find an alternative employment for that individual, but it would be very much based on the individual circumstances of the injury, what the individual would be able to do and what the employer is able to offer. But obviously, if somebody were to find themselves in that situation, and if they're a member of the RCN, we would say obviously get in touch with us and we can talk that through in much more detail and support in relation to that going forward. So I hope that answers your question, although it doesn't give you a direct yes or a no answer.
So I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight. It's been great to do this event. I'd like to thank Rob and Ben in the background who've done some brilliant organisation with getting the event off the ground and doing some of the background, to Bella for a brilliant introduction to how she settled in the UK. I was laughing. I'm glad I was off screen because it was very warm and I loved that. To Claire for her insights and her wonderful presentation about the legalities and some of the principles. That was really helpful. I'd like to thank Peter for answering questions and Emma for her free plug for event on the 6th of December. And if you are in Northern or Yorkshire and Humber region, you are very, very welcome to attend that event. Sadly, if you're not from those regions, there will be a network near you probably. If you contact your regional office, they'll be able to help you with that. So thank you very much, everybody. And the next event, I'm not quite sure of the date, but they are all advertised on the RCN website, which is well worth a look when you've got a moment. It's a brilliant resource. And as I say, I'm passionate about the Royal College of Nursing. I'm passionate about nursing. And if you are a nurse, why wouldn't you be a member of a Royal College of Nursing? So thank you all and good night. Keep warm if you're in the cold and keep cool if you're in the warm. Cheerio then. Bye now.